MPLS Layer 3 VPN carrier supporting carrier or CSC. In this video, I'm going to talk about the CSC, another form of inter-AS MPLS Layer 3 VPN. Let me talk about the CSC, and after that we can start the configuration and we can compare it with the inter-AS MPLS VPNs we learned before. Look at here. In this scenario, as you can see, again, we have two customer site, customer site A, and in site 1, and then customer site B in site 1, and also here we have customer site A, site 2, and also another customer site B, site 2. And you know that we need to configure the MPLS between the for example, these two sites about the customer A and also customer B. And finally, we need to have connectivity between R13 and also for example, 15, and also R14 and R16. Okay, you know that the different customer sites should have connectivity to each other. And as you can see here, the customer A site 1 and customer B site 1 connected to the one ISP. Assume that this is the ISP A, and also customer A site 2 and customer B site 2 are connected to the, for example, the ISP 2, ISP B, and this is another ISP. And also we can't connect these two ISPs directly to each other. Because of that, we can't use the MPLS Layer 3 VPN inter-AS option A, option B, option A, B, or option C. Why? Because we don't have direct link between these two, for example, ISPs. Now we are using another ISP. This ISP is the backbone ISP, or I assume that this is ISP C, and we need to use this ISP to connect to ISP A and ISP B. This is a backbone carrier or backbone ISP, and these two ISPs are customer carrier or customer ISP. Okay, because of that, MPLS VPN carrier supporting carrier or CSC enables one MPLS VPN based service provider to allow other service providers to use a segment of its backbone network. Let me to start the configuration, and after that we can understand the detail of how we can configure the CSC. Don't forget that in this scenario, I'm going to configure every router step by step. You can follow me. After the configuration of one router, you can stop the video and configure that router. Again, you can continue the watching to the video. And let me to say that the goal of this scenario is to connectivity between R13 and R15, and also R14 and R16 between their loopback IP addresses, as you can see here. And don't forget that finally we will have one VPN v4 session between the R8 and R1. Look at here. As you can see here, the R1 is the P router of the ISP A, and the R8 is the PE router of the ISP B. Okay, we need to configure one direct VPN v4 session between R1 and R8. This means that we need to have connectivity between R1 and R8's loopback 0, and finally we can configure the neighborship about the VPN v4 between them. Because of that, first you need to try to advertising the addresses of the R1 to the R8 from the backbone carrier, and also the address of the R8 to R1 from the backbone carrier. After that, you can configure the neighborship between the R1 and R8 to advertising VPN v4. Because of that, the first goal is to configure connectivity between the router 1 and router 8. You know that in normal scenarios, we are using a service provider and, for example, two customer sites. Here we have the same condition. This backbone carrier, okay, can react to the customer carriers as its customers. Okay, it's for example, and the R4 is the CE for the backbone carrier. You can configure the backbone carrier and also these two customer sites, the customer carriers. After that, you will connectivity between the R1 and R8. You can configure VPN v4 between them, and finally you will have connectivity between the customer site, for example, customer A site 1 and customer A site 2, and also B site 1 and B site 2. The first side of the configuration is the side of the backbone carrier. Let me first configuring the backbone carrier, because the customer carriers are customers of the backbone carrier. First, we need to have connectivity between these two customer carrier. Let me start the configuration with a notepad file, starting from the backbone carrier from the router 9. This is the router 9 configuration. Now we will add the other side of configuration to the this notepad file. The first command is en then conft. This is a normal provider. Let me to configure it. Host name is R9. Also, you know that we need to configure interface ETH00, and then the IP address of this interface, for example, is 10.9.10.9.255.255.255.0. Let me to use no shutdown command here, and also is the command, the IGP is OSPF, IP OSPF network, for example, point to point, and after that IP OSPF 1 area 0, for example. And also we can configure one loopback interface here, interface loopback 0. The IP address of loopback 0 in router 9 is 192.168.254.9 quad 255. Let me to use IP OSPF 1 area 0 on this interface also, and after that router OSPF 1. After that, the router ID can be configured with the 192.168.254.1, and finally we can use MPLS LDP auto, for example, config MPLS LDP auto config. Then if you want, you can configure the MPLS label range here, MPLS label range between 100 to 199. And also, you know that we need to configuring the VRFs in the router 9. Let me to configure one VRF, for example, VRF ISP1. This is the name of VRF ISP-A, okay, because this is the ISP-A, the ISP-A, ISP-B. I'm going to use the VRF name ISP-A, VRF definition. This is the customer of the backbone carrier, and then the VRF definition ISP-A. For example, we can configure one RD for this customer. The RD can be configured 65,000. Look at here, the AS number of the backbone carrier is 65,000. I'm going to use the RD 65,000 colon 1, okay? And after that, in address family, for example, IPv4 unicast, we need to configure the route target both 65,000 colon 1. You know that here we are using two customers, two ISPs, but these two ISP are customers of the backbone carrier, and they need to connect to each other. Because of that, both of them are same as the two sides of a customer. Let me to configure with the same route target import and also route target export for these customers, for these ISPs. Route target both 65,000 colon 1. That's it. And then we need to configure the interface ETH01 interface. ETH01, the IP address of this is the member of VRF forwarding, for example, ISP-A, and then the IP address of this interface is 10, because this is between the router 9 and router 4. Let me to use the IP address as the 10.499.255.255.255.0, and then no shutdown. That's it. Then we need to configure BGP with BGP neighborship with the R12. Let me to use the router BGP 65,000. No. For example, you can configure no BGP default IP before unicast. It's not important for us. Let me to configure the neighbor command, neighbor 192.168.254.12 remote AS 65,000, and then neighbor 192.168.254.12. Again, update source loopback, for example, update source loopback 0, and then address family VPN v4 unicast, the neighbor 192.168.254.12 activate. This is the BGP for R9. Also, we have one VRF. Let me to configure address family, okay, IPv4 for VRF. The name of VRF is ISP-A. Then here you need to configure BGP neighborship with the router for neighbor 10, 9, okay, 10.